History has shown us it's human nature to think that anyone that looks different than us is inferior. This is poisonous and always false. They call these allegedly inferior human beings all kinds of names. In the case of anthropologists, they call them a different species. When digging yourself into a hole, stop digging. There are other introgressions. We are all 100% Homo sapiens, all brothers and sisters. Pictures always showed Neanderthal bent over, drooling, slack-jawed, with flies buzzing around its head. I could show pictures from the horror days of segregation that are almost identical. This image was commissioned by Charles Marsh, of Bone Wars fame, and produced under his direction. He was a eugenicist. Inferior humans, which always seemed to look different than he did, needed to be weeded out. Guess which one is the Neanderthal? Neanderthal brains were much larger than ours. Late Neanderthal is about 1500 cc's, we are about 1300 cc's, and late Homo erectus was about 1100 cc's. To Neanderthal, we are all just a bunch of filbert-brained Homo erectus. Yeah, I know. Anyone that doesn't look like us is inferior, so that brain means nothing. Yeah, I got it. This Neanderthal skull was chosen because it looks a lot different, and they want to show the difference. That's fine. Late Neanderthal, for a long time in some areas, looked a lot more like ours, but with a huge brain. On this channel, all the Neanderthals are dignified and good-looking. They probably looked a lot like Native Americans. It's impossible to survive in the cold without sewn clothes. They wore jewelry and had a thing for black feathers. Let's look at a few as we talk. I used to have dozens of published peer-reviewed papers, all proudly proclaiming they had discovered why Neanderthals were inferior and extinct. For the first half-century or so, they said Neanderthal could swing from the branches by its toes. Neanderthal feet are exactly like ours. Heck, Australopithecus feet are virtually identical to ours and no more able to grab a branch with their toes than we are. They said Neanderthal was too stupid to speak, in fact, anatomically incapable of it. Then we found the hyoid bone, showing they spoke just fine. They said Neanderthal only ate large animals. Turns out they ate all sizes. They said Neanderthal didn't eat vegetables. Then we learned from the tooth calculus that veggies were a large part of some Neanderthals' diet. They even said Neanderthal couldn't throw spears and walked up and stabbed cave bears. And these guys graduated from college. Then we found the 300-year-old Schellingen spears, some of which were for throwing. Chauvet is full of cave bear skulls, including one on a pedestal. Yeah, Neanderthal killed them, and that they could make short work of a mugger on the subway, but not likely they walked up and stabbed cave bears with a pointed stick. They said Neanderthal was too stupid to eat fish. Turns out some Neanderthals ate a lot of fish, including bluefin tuna, a deep-water fish you had to have a boat to catch. Why not? We know Neanderthal made it to the islands of the Mediterranean 200,000 years ago. They didn't swim there. And, of course, the big one. They sequenced the Neanderthal mtDNA and learned it was totally absent in existing humans. They proudly proclaimed they had scientific proof we weren't related. There were a few diehards that still said Neanderthal was an ancestor, but they were outnumbered 100 to 1 by those that said 100% of our ancestors had popped up in a cabbage patch 140,000 years ago. Then, in 2010, they finally sequenced the Neanderthal nuclear DNA, and it's an ancestor of everyone on Earth. 99% of anthropologists were flat out wrong. The fact is, Neanderthal art, musical instruments, and tools were the equal or superior to any other humans on the planet at the time, usually superior. In summary, for the entire history of anthropology, it's a demonstrated fact that virtually all anthropologists badly underestimated Neanderthal and underestimated how closely related they are. And we're always looking for ways to show their inferiority and how they aren't related. That's an indisputable fact. It would require very strong evidence to claim they no longer do. On the subject of cave art, first we need to point out that things rot and disappear after tens of thousands of years. Anthropologists thought woven cloth was a recent invention. Then they found 27,000-year-old impressions of cloth in burnt clay. Turns out the famous Venus of Willendorf is wearing a woven hat. The older the cave art gets, the less likely any survived. The oldest Chauvet Cave art is 36,500 years old, plus or minus a couple thousand. It survived because a series of landslides around 28,000 years ago perfectly sealed the entrance, and because it had a layer of clay between it and the surface that protected it from the water. Anthropologists were shocked when they saw it. How did early, so-called modern humans develop that skill all of a sudden? Good question. Where is all the amazing cave art from wherever the heck you think they came from? This is a map of the oldest cave art in the world. It's also a map of the last Neanderthals. And it's a map of the best cave art ever created, at least in prehistory. By amazing coincidence, the oldest and best cave art and the last Neanderthals are all in the same exact spot. It also includes the oldest so-called modern bones in Iberia and France before 30,000 years ago, since there are none. Only Neanderthal bones, lots and lots of Neanderthal bones, at least with the uncalibrated dates. The calibrated dates only seem to affect Neanderthal bones for some reason. Nothing else is pushed back 10 to 15,000 years. Using the calibrated dates, there are no two-legged apes for over 10,000 years. Lots and lots of bones in the 10,000 years before and after, but zero between 30 and 40,000 years ago. The emperor has no clothes. The oldest cave art is approximately 240,000 years old by Homo naledi in Rising Star Cave in South Africa. There's a big dispute between Lee Berger that found it and a lot of anthropologists that think that anyone that looks different from us is an inferior species. In this case, with a brain not a lot larger than a chimp. If Homo naledi could make fire, which is close to a proven fact as it gets in anthropology, they could definitely scrape a rock. There are 3 caves in Iberia with art over 64,000 years old, including Maltravizio. The dates come from calcite leaching out of the rocks in little spots and covering the art. The art is older than the calcite that covers it, so they're all minimum ages. At that age, they are all by Neanderthal. This handprint idea is in most caves where there's art. Something really satisfying about putting your signature on the wall. Ardells in southern Iberia, near Gibraltar, is also over 64,000 years old. In this case, Neanderthal was painting the stalactites. Any details have been blurred by time or faded away. Last, but far from least of the 3 old ones, is La Pasiega. It has geometric stuff and a strange graphic that's hard to understand. But there's also faint outlines of animals, the oldest figurative art in the world, and it's by Neanderthal. Those that think anyone that looks different from them is inferior argue that some calcite in some spots on the art isn't that old. 12,000 years old, for instance. Lord, give me the patience. The 64,000-year-old calcite dot says it's at least that old, but could be 100,000. The 12,000-year-old calcite dot says it's at least that old, but could be 100,000. If the calcite dots were the same age, that would discredit it. And of course, they question whether the uranium-thorium dating used on the calcite dots is accurate. The next oldest art is La Roche-Guitare in France. It is at least 57,000 years old. And it's not dated with the uranium-thorium like the calcite dots in the previous three. It's dated with stratigraphy, the dirt covering it. The cave was perfectly sealed by a landslide 57,000 years ago. Only Neanderthal was around, and it's only Neanderthal stuff in the cave. The art is badly deteriorated patterns in the soft dirt of the wall done with the fingers. In this case, we'll make an exception and show some other art found in the cave, also over 57,000 years old, the famous Neanderthal mask. The eyes were inserted into the eye sockets of something that looked like a face. The dating for it all is guessed at 75,000, but we know for sure it's over 57,000. Next is the seals of Nraha at about 42,000 years old in southern Iberia, not far from Gibraltar. It's about the second oldest figurative art in the world and also by Neanderthal. El Castillo is over 40,800 years old. Could be much older. This particular figurative art hasn't been solidly dated, but El Castillo is in the same little mountain right next to La Pasiega, the oldest figurative art in the world. So far, 6 of the 7 oldest cave art is by Neanderthal, and none are by the so-called modern humans. The Sulawesi pig in Indonesia is about 40,000 years old. It might be by Denisovans or Neanderthals, we just don't know. Very old figurative art, as nice as anything else that age. The art in Gorham's Cave is 39,000 years old and surprisingly identical to the 240,000-year-old Homo naledi art. It was a truism, before they started finding it in caves, that an X or crosshatch thing is a strong human instinct when we doodle. If you draw a line, it just feels good to draw another line crossing it. Now we come to Chauvet at 36,500 years old. The best art in Chauvet is the oldest, and then it goes downhill fast, probably because Neanderthal was gone. It's orders of magnitude superior to any other cave art even remotely that old, and some of it, such as the 4 horses, is arguably the best art the human race has ever produced. They are far superior to any drawing of a horse by Leonardo or Michelangelo. Not just photographically more accurate, but a far more profound understanding of horses and their behavior. Anyone that knows horses can tell you what all 4 were up to. The beautiful art of Altamira is generally dated to around 23,000 years old, but some more simple stuff goes back perhaps 36,000 years. It's very close to La Pasiega, the Neanderthal oldest figurative art in the world, and the rather old El Castillo, with similar but more simple figurative art. Like Altamira, Lascaux is superior to any other cave art from any time other than Chauvet. Beautiful horses, but like Leonardo and Michelangelo, inferior to Chauvet. Oh yeah. The closest Neanderthal remains to Chauvet, and the same age, is Saint Césaire. This is my rendering of what she looked like. We know from her bones she had a very hard life. I guess the notion of starving artists goes back tens of thousands of years. Finally, here's a short video from Werner Herzog's Cave of Forgotten Dreams about Chauvet. You can see it on YouTube, linked below. If you are interested in this stuff, you absolutely have to watch it. Still pictures and artificial light don't give it justice. Hardened scientists that visit Chauvet are shook up by the emotional effect. Werner Herzog transmits that feeling with this incredible video. Drop to your knees and weep for the lost genius of our brothers and sisters, our fellow Homo sapiens with those huge brains, Neanderthal.